Foreign Minister Edmund, thank you very much indeed. Don't take a Minecraft approach to Africa. It's not a game. That will, I'm sure, be one of the quotes of the day. Right, we want to delve a little bit deeper now into how rapidly, how aggressively banking and the finance sector in general is changing, and how this transformation might drive long-term growth, inclusion, and resilience. This session is entitled Finance Without Borders, AI, Open Finance, and the Global Opportunity. It's in partnership with AWS and will be moderated by Head of Reuters Professional, Josh London. Come on out.
Good afternoon. Welcome, Chris, and welcome, Divyesh. Great to see you both. We're going to talk about AI and finance, but first let's start with how you see financial services in the Gulf evolving beyond traditional banking. And what role is AI already playing in that transformation?
Certainly from my perspective, I think it's not just in the Gulf. If you look globally, we're starting to see a number of trends around how financial services organizations are starting to adopt technology at rapid pace in order to bring new customer experiences to the market, to the fore, how they think about proactively driving fraud prevention and detection. If I look at the Gulf, even more so than many other areas because of the strong vision that we have in the region, and then the willingness to invest in the technology, the skills that underpin that. So I've seen many organizations start to leverage that to build out this new capability. We have one example of an organization who is proactively driving fraud prevention through monitoring first-time payments from individuals. So they're noticing if a payment comes through for the first time from someone or is made by someone to another beneficiary for the first time, that gets flagged as a high-risk transaction. They're proactively going back to that individual or that organization, asking them for feedback as to whether it is absolutely a real transaction or whether this could potentially be fraudulent. So you're seeing this utilization of technology proactively rather than not. So big evolution in that.
Divyesh, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I was reading Satya's letter this morning. Sorry to talk about Microsoft with my AWS colleague here. And he talked about thinking in decades and executing in quarters. If I think of my time here in GCC, what's been happening here, I would say, is that, yes, the leaders here are thinking long term, but I would say they want to execute in weeks, not in quarters, right? And so the Gulf, in my view, is not just adapting to the future of finance. I would say it's actively reshaping it. And you see that with sovereign AI infrastructure investments, open finance ecosystems. It's fundamentally shifting the landscape to be, I think, much more intelligent, much more inclusive, and I think more resilient. And some of the examples that Chris cited, allude to that. And you can talk about, endless data points in terms of 30 billion of investments in AI by 2030. You talk about AI is going to account for 14% of the GDP by around that time. But beyond the numbers, it's really how it's going to level the playing field, right, across different segments of society. And that truly is exciting.
And we were talking earlier about how natural resources as the majority of GDP are being replaced. How is financial innovation fueling that long-term economic growth?
So we see that literally in front of our eyes, right, with the announcement of Stargate, for instance, here in UAE. And you're starting to see this incredible convergence, right? So if you sort of listen to Sam Altman, he talks about his two passions, energy and AI, and how they've come together, right? And just in the same way that energy was the kind of all-time level setter over the past decades, access to energy, electricity, etc., AI, I think, could be the same driving force to level the playing field when it comes to intelligence. But that requires, to your point, the types of investments in AI infrastructures, which we're starting to see take shape. And that, for me, is what's really, putting kind of words to action, right?
It's an interesting time with sovereign data, and I'm curious, Chris, if you can tell us how banks and technology companies like AWS collaborate to build trust and resilience when meeting growing regulatory and sovereignty requirements.
And I think, again, trust and resiliency is a core part, a core piece of that, right? And if you look at some of the work that's being done in the Gulf, specifically in the UAE, around sovereign architecture, sovereign infrastructure, I know certainly for AWS, we've made an announcement around a $1 billion partnership with one of the national champions in EAN, where we are jointly deploying sovereign controls to allow organizations to build on top of that. So we understand that being able to provide access to the technology, the controls, is the first bit. The next bit is the absolute trust that once it is deployed, it's auditable, it's managed, you can continue to build on that. That's the one bit. So allowing organizations to build, develop, drive new innovation and capabilities for their customers in the country in a controlled environment that is sovereign is one bit. But then I think we've got to consider the flip side to that, which is if we're too closed off in an individual country, are we missing some of the benefit that can come from being part of a broader ecosystem as well? So the sovereignty is important, the trust and resilience is critically important, but some of that comes from partnerships in a broader scale. So we're looking at sovereignty as a key pillar for organizations to be able to build and provide these new services, but at the same time, think about the ability to harness what is the best of global at the same time.
I know you have thoughts about this also, Divyesh.
Look, I think to add to what Chris said, the bedrock of trust is resilience.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's number one, to make sure that any infrastructure that a bank of our size and shape is making or innovating, it has to be resilient. Our customers have to be able to sort of wake up in the morning, access their accounts, withdraw their money, do their normal daily activities without being impacted. To build that resilience, we also need to then sort of make sure that the systems and the architectures that we deploy are explainable, right? Especially when it comes to AI. And then finally, to make sure that we've deployed the right sort of ethical AI guardrails into that. And that is kind of fundamental. And one of the things that kind of bothers me a little bit is when I see this hiatus and rush to kind of tick a few boxes. Let's do a POC here. Let's do a use case over here. And oftentimes those don't scale, right? Because we haven't built the required level of resilience. So one of the things that I kind of constantly am mindful of is how do we make sure that when we're adopting new technology like AI and in the not too distant future quantum, that we're doing so in a safe, secure, and sustainable manner through the build-out of platforms. And that's where the partnerships with AWS and other hyperscalers is absolutely critical, and the investments that this region is making in establishing things like the sovereign AI infrastructure is fundamental to that.
GCC is certainly, and the UAE is certainly exporting a lot of innovation. Where would you say they should look for importing that innovation? Are there other areas that they would look to for inspiration?
So I have spent the longest time of my working life in Singapore, right? And I'm relatively new to this part of the world. But what I'm seeing is that this part of the world has been incredibly effective at assimilating and, as you said, importing a lot of that expertise. If I now sort of reflect on, say, open finance and the way that UAE is adopting open finance, having learned all the lessons of what happened in the UK, Europe, Asia, etc., there's a real opportunity now with the way in which we're building the whole ecosystem in this part of the world. We will be the reference point, I would say, in the not too distant future, where other parts of the world will look at us in terms of how we cracked some of the challenges, specifically when it comes to things like open finance.
I want to build on open finance there. As open finance expands beyond banking, what new opportunities and maybe what new risks emerge in building a more inclusive, competitive, and interoperable financial system?
And I think the one bit is, if you look at how quickly, I'm just going to start with the technology for a second and then move into the rest. If you look at how quickly the technology space is moving when it comes to infrastructure investments, Divyesh, you touched on all the investment that's coming to the region. I saw a number as recently as yesterday that there's $38 billion committed investment from 5 large technology organizations in the UAE and Kingdom of Saudi over the next 5 years alone. Okay, so that gives access to scalable infrastructure for any organization, no matter how large they are or how small they are, if it is a fintech, to get access to the same technology in order to build out new services. So that in itself encourages an open market. I think in terms of open finance, these fintechs, these new organizations are able to go into, supply chain financing as one example. The other bit is how you think about payments into e-commerce processes. It's not just the traditional players that now have access to be able to work with the large organizations in new markets when they have access to resources readily available right here in the region.
Anything to add?
Look, I would say that open finance, a lot of different parts of the world, as I alluded to earlier, have been trying to sort of crack it. It hasn't been cracked, in my view, right? And I think there are multiple reasons for that. And it's really about, the biggest challenge has been about creating a level playing field, right? Where you allow the startups to sort of innovate and have access to infrastructure. And frankly, large banks also need to sort of play their role in that. But at the same time, large banks also want to see what's in it for us, right? So that's just to put it out there. So ultimately, I think that, collaboration is the new disruption, and that collaboration across the ecosystem between the startups, between the established players, facilitated by everything that the institutions are doing, the governments are doing, I think is going to be key. So I'm very optimistic that we will actually crack open finance in this part of the world better than what I've seen in other parts of the world.
Open finance also creates opportunities to expand access, not just expand market opportunities, but expand access to credit, to investment, to protection for underserved communities. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to sort of just share a small example. At FAB, we launched a wallet solution called Pay It a few years ago. And that was specifically built to make it a lot more cost effective for the blue collar workers to remit money back to, back home. What's really interesting is how that wallet has now evolved beyond just that segment of society. We have now more than 1 million active users in this part of the world using that, and it's actually started to evolve into, investments, wealth management, savings products, and it's driving not just financial inclusion, but financial literacy and savings, and it's being adopted by, other segments, where families are now using the wallet to basically manage and disperse, funds. So the father would sort of disperse the pocket-moneyed kids using the wallet, right? So it's kind of driving that financial literacy beyond inclusion. So that's just one example, but there are a multitude of examples like that that we're seeing in this part of the world.
I think we talked about fractional ownership, property ownership as well was one that you were excited about.
Yeah, so if I may continue on that one, that again I think is testament to the kind of the vision and the innovation from the leadership, right, in this part of the world. So, for instance, the regulation in Dubai with the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority that allows for the establishment of digital real estate platforms will make it a lot more accessible for those individuals who may feel that they don't have the kinds of sums of money and capital to buy an entire apartment, to have a fractional ownership in an apartment. And that sort of is quite exciting. And we've seen that launched in the last year or so, and we're going to see more and more of that. Again, that innovation is being built here. And to your earlier question, I can absolutely see that platform and those ideas being exported to other parts of the world.
Chris, AWS in many ways is foundational for a lot of this innovation. Are there areas that you're particularly excited about?
I think we've touched very much on the AI subject right now, and I think if we look at the impact that generative AI and AI will have, not just on financial services but on every conceivable industry, I think that is absolutely starting to pull many markets forward. But taking a step back from that, it's actually the data as the underlying platform that serves that for me is incredibly interesting, because ultimately that will drive the new capabilities, the new experiences, the new opportunities to go into markets that otherwise wasn't there. And I think for me, watching organizations focus on how they can securely share data, make data accessible to other organizations, to their partners, I think is something that will drive material benefit going forward. We speak about, again, some of the examples around open finance. I think using that to be able to bring the unbanked into the banking system as well is a critically important thing that we can start to look at. But I think generative AI, the experiences that come with that, and then everyone talks about agentic AI, right? So how we then start to use agentic to essentially take away some of the heavy lifting that organizations or individuals would take on themselves in order to focus on the absolute value for their customers, I think is the really exciting bit.
Josh, if I may just build on that, and I was looking at the question, how do you see data insight expanding financial AI business? If I just pick on that question and build on what Chris was saying, without data, there is no AI, right? It's like, I think it's pretty obvious. And I almost equate data to air, right? It needs to be instant, invisible, and clean, right? And one of the ways in which data insights can drive growth through AI is by making sure that everybody invests in getting the data organized in a way that AI and then agentic can consume it effectively and safely. Otherwise, I fear that a lot of the fears around is there going to be the right ROI for AI, will materialize.
Thank you. There are a number of audience questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but let's try. As FIs move sensitive policyholder and customer data into shared environments, what should the balance between, there's a little bit of a glare, innovation, localization, and cybersecurity be?
How do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I look at my colleague here to make sure that they build an infrastructure that allows us to do that. But ultimately, it is our responsibility. Our customers' data is synonymous with their financial balances. It is sacred, it's sovereign, and it's absolutely something that needs to be protected and maintained. So everything that we do is that question. That kind of defines my day job. It's really that balancing act between making sure that you're not going to compromise anyone's data, but at the same time build solutions that are cost effective to achieving that aim. And the thought I would leave with the audience is, the more we think as a collaborative community across GCC to try and solve for this, I think we'll be better off.
I think just to add to that, I mean, Divyesh, you sort of called out that you rely on colleagues like myself to help make sure this is reality. For us, being able to provide, firstly, security for us is job zero. We will make sure that we work with our customers, with our partners, to provide all the tooling, all the capability to get the security posture exactly where it needs to be. and then allow you to build and innovate on top of that. But what we will not do is focus on the innovation driving, I guess, the cool experiences without us making sure that we get the posture exactly where it needs to be. So for me, you've almost got to over-index on making the security is exactly where it needs to be before you can think about scaling anything when it comes to technology and for custom experiences. So it definitely is we talk about a shared responsibility model. It absolutely is a partnership when we think about these things.
That's our time. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Josh, thank you to you and to the panel. Our next guest is the founder and chair of one of the world's most valuable